Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. This is the First Round Mailbag Australian Open 2025. It is tradition around here to begin a slam with a mailbag. Sometimes it's on Monday. This time it's on Tuesday. Wanted to wait for the first round matches to end. You know how it is. Australian Open, crazy time zone, crazy schedules, but we love it. And I'll tell you what, the Fonseca result, which I didn't get to see live because of the time, it really gave me kind of a jolt. Like, it was one of those big moments in tennis that are exciting because they're important and you feel like you're going to remember them forever. And honestly, the best thing about covering tennis, and it's probably the best thing about being a fan of tennis, is when somebody young, new, and exciting comes up. I mean, there are other exciting things, but that is top of my list, probably. With that said, before I get into all of your comments, and there were many of them, as I'll get into, many, I want to give you what I promised at the end of my Fonseca over Rublev breakdown, which is a video and a podcast that I posted earlier this morning. I said that I would give you my big picture takeaways from not only what he did against Rublev, but also what he's done in the last 2 months and where I'm at with Fonseca and his long-term prospects right now. And I have a few points to make, but let me just start by giving you the reasons why to stay grounded here, to not get too excited, to not expect too much too soon, based on the Rublev win in particular. First of all, if you just look at the matchup, I think he presents a pretty blatant matchup problem for Rublev. I don't think that that's confirmation bias because I did say it in the preview, and it's pretty simple. Rublev can get bothered by pace. Like, pace really does affect Rublev. The big hitters, the guys who are going to serve big and just hit big against him, he's a little bit vulnerable to that. There are going to be players who defensively, and I can't wait to see it, it's going to be very entertaining. Defensively, they're going to pose very different issues for Fonseca. And I'm excited to see how he handles those particular opponents who do handle pace really, really well, who will be able to absorb the firepower that he brings to the table. Nobody's going to fully absorb it because it's just at that level, but you know what I mean. Do a better job of withstanding some of that stuff. He's going to also play guys who are able to make him run more. I thought because he dominated the serve return dynamic against Rublev, he did play a lot out of the middle of the court. He's going to run into matchups and he's going to be running more. We'll see how he handles that. He is going to start to feel more external pressure. He got to go out there against Rublev. It's his slam debut. He's playing the 9 seed. He's not supposed to win. At least in his head, he's not supposed to win. More and more as his star grows and as his results pick up. And I think it seems like he has a great head on his shoulders and he hasn't rushed anything. And I think he's going to be really good. But you always have to proceed with caution with the young guys about how they're going to deal with the external pressure that is ultimately going to build. He is still a question mark physically, meaning I don't know if he can play a 4-hour match and recover for the next day, which is what a slam, well, maybe you have a day off, but like, you know what I mean? The tour as a whole, and especially major tournaments and best out of 5, they often require a level of durability and endurance that we don't know if Fonseca has that yet. He's been blitzing everybody. I mean, he hasn't played a long match. I don't think on this 13-match win streak, he did play that match against Mensik in Saudi Arabia where it went to 5 tiebreaks in the Fast 4 format. I don't know how long that match ended up being, but Fonseca has not really had to play a long match, which is incredible in its own right, but he's still a question mark physically. And then the last thing, and this might be the most important thing, it always takes time. And this is what I said, I don't know when, but at some point recently, I said, it always takes time. Again, the bar for Fonseca, if you're going to compare him to Sinner and Alcaraz, and at some point I might go back and take a look at Federer and Nadal and Djokovic, and I'm assuming Djokovic, Federer will be a lot more modest than Nadal, who it really happened quickly for Rafa. But normally your first year on tour, you do not do all that well. I mean, if you make the top 30, you had a terrific first year on tour. So, I mean, Sinner and Alcaraz, after their first year, playing main, and when I say first year on tour, I mean playing main draw tour level start to finish. Sinner and Alcaraz finished around 30 in the world, their first years. That should be the bar for Fonseca if you're setting it at its very highest. I actually think he could, I think he'll meet that bar. That said, I'm not going to lie. As I was watching Fonseca take on Rublev, him being a prospect who I was already extremely high on, I already suspected that he may be a future great. I just naturally wanted to see him in certain situations, and still do, right? Some of those questions were answered for me by nature of him playing Rublev, at least to an extent. Like, I wanted to see Fonseca against more high-level competition. I wanted to see Fonseca in a big stadium at a big tournament. I had never seen these things. So as impressed as I was with Fonseca and his abilities and what he does, I still needed to see those things in order to kind of get further along to cementing my view that he is a future great. And I already thought that it might be. He might be. I was kind of already there, and now I'm pretty much there. And it didn't take much, and I'm not overreacting to one match, because again, it was all of the tennis I watched him play over the course of last year that had me very, very close to feeling like he's a future great. And I just needed to see a couple things, and this was it. So I'm watching him beat Andrei Rublev in the first round, who is part of this generation of players in their mid to now late 20s. Medvedev, Zverev, Tsitsipas, Rublev. Those four guys who all have one thing in common. They were all top 10 players when they were in their early 20s. They were all top 10 players at a time when Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic were aging. So they were in the tier 2. And of course, the thought, the just common knowledge thought, conventional wisdom was that as the big three aged, as the big three faded away, that by nature of the passage of time, those guys would ascend. Those guys would eventually rule the sport. And all they needed was the elites that were currently occupying the top class to exit. And obviously, we saw a fast rise of Alcaraz. We saw a rise of Sinner that seemed to really accelerate, obviously, at the end of 2023. But with that, it became very clear that he too has reached that elite status of the very highest level. And suddenly, guys got leapfrogged. Like, we saw a young Alcaraz beating Tsitsipas, I believe, 3 times in 2022. Guys got leapfrogged. There is still one slam in that generation of players. That would have been unthinkable. So what's the lesson here? And what does this have to do with Fonseca? I'll tell you what it has to do with Fonseca. I'm watching him beat Rublev, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's another. It's another guy who, not right now, but there's not a lot of time until suddenly Fonseca is a problem. He is a problem for Zverev. He is a problem for Medvedev. Right now, I mean, Tsitsipas and Rublev need to get back to even contending because they're not even there right now. But it would be a problem for them as well. He is another. Here he comes. The lesson here is that the passage of time is never going to be good enough. You have to keep improving. You have to keep adding to your game. You must get better, because the passage of time simply wasn't enough for these guys. They didn't improve enough. And now we're in a place where, things look more bleak for them here at the start of 2025, save for Zverev, who I actually think has made more improvements in the last 2 years than the rest of them. Although Medvedev has tried very, very hard. It's just been a challenge. It's tough sledding as Alcaraz and Sinner continue to develop. And here comes Fonseca. I'm not going to put other names in that class right now, but there could be more. So, one more thing on this. By nature of what I just said, I know I'm going to get people going, really, Gill? You're going to lump Fonseca in with Alcaraz and Sinner? Are you serious? What has Joao Fonseca done to earn that? I'll tell you what he's done. Nothing. Nothing to earn it. This is the same thing that I got all throughout the beginning of 2022 and some of 2021 even with Carlos Alcaraz and my coverage of Carlos Alcaraz. There were so many people telling me that I was overhyping the guy because his results didn't warrant the way I was speaking about him. I will be the first to admit right now, Joao Fonseca's results do not warrant the way I'm speaking about him. I am simply using my eyes, trusting my eyes, watching the tennis. I see a guy who has a level of specialness and completeness that makes me believe that he is one of those generational, different kind of talents that will be at the top of the sport. It has nothing to do with his results. And if you want to wait for the proof, and for Alcaraz, it probably didn't come, the really hard proof that he was a generational, all-time guy, probably didn't come until he beat Djokovic in the 5-set Wimbledon final. If you want to wait for that moment for Fonseca, maybe it's 2 years from now, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's even longer, maybe it's 3 years from now. If you want to wait for that moment, fine. You can go ahead and do that. You'll be late to the party. So that's my thought on the accusations of overhyping. Because, everyone, and I haven't said this very often, but I do want to say it. Everyone who said I was overhyping Carlos Alcaraz in 2021 and the first half of 2022 was dead wrong. Even after the U.S. Open, I got it a little bit when people were like, he's got one slam, draw was easy. Relax. Stop crowning him. Whatever. All of those people were dead wrong, which is okay. I've been dead wrong about things all the time. But I'm just going to use that as an example at this time when talking about Fonseca of why I feel liberated to talk about someone like that before the results necessarily merit it, right? Okay. That said, it's time to do a mailbag. And this is an exciting one. Before I get into it, just a quick shout out to the many ways to consume Monday Match Analysis in 2025. Instagram, @Gill Gross _ I have been doing the short form stuff. Seems to be working. People seem to be enjoying it. Also on TikTok, which might be going away soon in the United States. That's interesting. Also on my new channel dedicated to shorts. It's called Gill Gross Shorts. I will be posting some exclusive stuff over on that. So if you give me a follow on those platforms, as well as Facebook. Facebook is just clips from the podcast, but I still encourage you to go to the Facebook page, the Monday Match Analysis Facebook page as well. All of those things are up and running, and I appreciate it. Speaking of Instagram, for the first time ever, I went on Instagram and I went on my story, and I said, give me some mailbag questions. What's on your mind? I like to ask that. What's on your mind? And I got a ton of responses. I can't put them on the screen. And actually throughout this mailbag, and I hope this doesn't detract from the viewing experience too much, but there will be timestamps and chapters. I won't be putting the questions on the screen this time. But I've got Instagram comments, I've got comments on X, and I've got YouTube community. So let's get going. And I'm going to try to go pretty rapid fire. First one from UsJ9. Some quick thoughts on the Kokkinakis Draper round 2 match. They both looked like they were in rough shape in their first round matches. That's my main thought there. Draper, I watched the first 3 sets against Mariano Navone. I won't mince my words. He looked horrendous. The backhand had no confidence. It was almost like he had the yips on it early on. The forehand wasn't penetrating. There wasn't anything on his shots. And it just looked way, way off. And knowing what I know about Draper's preparation, the fact that he was dealing with the hip injury in the lead up, I imagine his prep has just been not ideal. And it certainly looked that way in the Navone match. Kokkinakis, he's banged up. And it looked like he was struggling his way through the Roman Safulin match and won on pure grit, heart, and determination with an assist to the Aussie crowd that was pushing him ahead. He's got good weapons with the serve and the forehand when he needs to sort of shorten things up. And I'm a little bit unclear on precisely what's wrong with Kokkinakis, but my only thoughts on that round 2 match, I have no idea what's going to happen. I guess it's whoever feels closer to 100%, because frankly, I don't think either of them were above 70% in their first round match. Next one from Deuce. Any surprises after the first round of the AO? What is your biggest shock of the tournament so far? This is a great question because the biggest upsets on paper, certainly on the men's side, I actually did predict them correctly. I had Fonseca winning. I had Michelsen winning. So nothing immediately comes to mind. I almost wish I had a list right now of the seeds that have lost so that I can better answer this question. Should I pull up the draw here? Let me have a quick scroll through the draw just to kind of run through things. So let me start with the men, but I do want to look at the women here. I was surprised that Hurkacz Griekspoor was as lopsided as it was. I thought that was going to be a 5-set match, and it was Hurkacz in 3. Berrettini over Norrie, that's one I got wrong. It's not a huge shock. It was a really close match on paper, but it is one that I wasn't correct in predicting. Rune over Zhang in 5. So that was almost a surprise if Zhang would have been able to pull that off, albeit it wouldn't have been a huge stunner. Cerundolo in straights over Bublik. Surprising scoreline. I probably gave a slight edge to Bublik coming into that match. So that was a little surprise. What else do we have here? Garin over Coric didn't surprise me. Monfils over Pechi Pericard. I don't know if anyone will ask about that match. I watched a lot of it yesterday. That one didn't surprise me. Shelton over Nakashima. So that's one I got wrong. 7-6, 7-5, 7-5. I thought Nakashima would win that match. Called the upset there and got it wrong. But are there any favorites who lost that surprised me? Because it's one thing if I get an upset pick wrong. It's another thing if a favorite loses. And man, I'm just not seeing it. Obviously, it was a massive shock that Medvedev went 5 with someone outside the top 400 in Kasidit Samrej of Thailand. But Medvedev still won. What do we got here? Anything? There's like no real surprising results. I thought Lucas Klein might beat Korda. Korda came through that. Yeah. I mean, I'm almost through the entire draw here, and I'm just not seeing anything. Kazo over Baez, that's not very surprising. Fearnley over Kyrgios, that's what I expected. Yeah, all right. I'm through the men's draw, and there's nothing here that's particularly surprising. Let me quickly go through the women's and try to scroll fast here. Towson over Neskova, not a surprise. Towson's playing great tennis right now. Is this bad podcasting? It might be bad podcasting. All right, I'm through the women's draw. Yeah, there were no huge surprises. That's actually pretty rare for a first round to go by, and it's really difficult to pinpoint anything that was truly surprising. All right, next question is from Bailey. Alcaraz's new service motion, improvement or needs some more work? I think improvement. I think it looks so much better, and I am not a biomechanics nerd. So often what I'll do is, as much as I try to learn as much as I can about technique, and I pick things up, it's just not my sweet spot necessarily. What I will do is I'll observe, okay, here are the players who have success in certain mechanics, in certain strokes, and just identifying what are the common themes here. And they're never all going to be the same. But Alcaraz's serve to me looks much closer to what most of the great serves or the above average serves look like. One thing that he's changed is he doesn't have a hitch or a pause in the trophy position. So when you kind of get that elbow in the L shape and you have the toss arm up and the ball is normally around somewhere around the apex of the toss, depending on how high your toss is. Essentially, when you bring your racket up, that position, the trophy position, every player is going to hit it at some point as a benchmark. But what Alcaraz would do is he'd bring the racket up and it would stop there. And what most of the best servers do, you look at a Federer or a Serena or a Kyrgios or a Opelka, Pechi Pericard, the racket doesn't stop. It flows through the trophy position, building momentum. And the swing path is, it's not continuous because it's a slow to fast swing path into the racket drop and then acceleration up into the ball. So it's not like it's moving at a constant speed and, you might have that lag in there, but the racket never stops. And Alcaraz has eliminated that pause in the motion, which is consistent with most of the best serves. Not all, but most. And I also just think the angle at which he's bringing his racket up looks so much more natural and so much less uncomfortable. So I cannot give you scientific reasons why I think Alcaraz's serve looks a million times better, but I can tell you to my eyes, it looks a million times better. And the big thing to look out for is going to be accuracy, because even with the old motion, Carlos had no problem lighting up the speed gun, hitting 130 miles per hour, flattening out the serve even into the mid 130s. No problem. The accuracy and the consistency has been the problem. So by adding smoothness and fluidity and changing the preparation and the racket path up into the trophy position, will Alcaraz achieve better accuracy on his serve? Because that's what he needs to be looking for. Let's see. And I don't think we'll be able to tell from this tournament alone. Maybe. If it's great, it's great. But if it's not great, sometimes it takes more time. So no overreactions on the Alcaraz service motion, please. Timothy asks, what are some nuances you look out for when analyzing other than big forehand / mental? It's kind of funny because I don't think I disproportionately look for big forehands or mental, but I mean, they're both highly important, that's for sure. Patterns. If I can give you like a one-word neat summation of what I look for when I'm analyzing tennis, I'm looking for patterns. And I'm taking those patterns, more specifically, let me put it in another phrasing. The alternate phrasing would be, I'm looking for things that are happening a lot, disproportionately so. And then I am taking those things that seem to be happening a lot, and I'm applying context to them. What do I know about both players? What do I know about the tactics that exist in order to create that situation or counter that situation? I'm applying analysis to the patterns that I'm seeing. From Patrick, Hadi Habib's rise. He served 10 plus aces in his 10-ish matches. Haven't watched him, unfortunately. From Micah. How does Nishikori do it? I don't know, man. Nishikori's 5-set record is one of those things that is beyond explanation because it's so good. And he definitely finds himself in 5-set matches sometimes early in majors with players that maybe he shouldn't go 5 against. But, clearly, first of all, I think his style, how well he sustains aggression without really being like a big weapons guy, he stays on top of you. He changes the direction of the ball often. He takes the ball early often, but he just doesn't have that home run hitting firepower. So I do think he wears opponents down. I think his fitness is incredible. I think he is a great fighter. And once you build confidence in these spots, this is true in every aspect of tennis, there is no better medicine for confidence than to just have a lot of success. And Nishikori's had tons of success in 5-setters, and he knows that. From Bartnick. How do you cover AO when the time zone mismatch is so bad? Are you just nocturnal for these 2 weeks? So what I do on my time zone is I basically stay up until usually 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning, and then I go to sleep. And as a result, I usually miss the last matches of the night session. But that covers a lot of tennis. Like if I'm only missing 3 matches every day, in theory, because there's 3 matches that are second on night session at the Australian Open, that's pretty good. So that's how I do it. And then I try to obviously sleep really, really late. Last night was weird because I kind of wanted to get up for Rublev Fonseca, but then Medvedev ended up going 5, so I stayed up for that. And then I ended up going to bed much later than I wanted. I realized there was no chance I was going to be able to wake up for Rublev Fonseca at that point. So I just went to sleep, set my alarm, 8 a.m., watched Rublev Fonseca after I woke up. From Aman, what do you think Hurkacz's tournament looks like after his commanding win over Griekspoor? Let's see. Well, I mean, I predicted him to the 4th round. It's looking like his potential 3rd round is the winner of Berrettini and Runa. Interesting. I mean, look, I don't have... Again, I could see him making the 4th round. That's what I have predicted. I haven't seen enough for me to think that Hurkacz is like a center threat in that 4th round match. But really great win for him. Thought Talon was a little off, but really great win for him. From Unlimited, what do you think of eliminating the second serve? Only one serve to speed it up. So in eliminating the second serve, what you'd actually be doing is you'd be making it exclusively second serve. I think it would completely change the game. It would make it a lot more physical. The taller guys would hate it. Anyone with a big serve would hate it. And ultimately, I just think it's so radical, I can't even wrap my head around it. I do see it in UTS, with Ultimate Tennis Showdown, Patrick Mouratoglou's thing. It just becomes sort of a cardio contest in UTS because you have the short shot clock and the one serve. Ultimately, I like the strategic nuances and the detail-oriented kind of stuff that we get as a result of the 2-serve thing. Like, I just think there's a lot more chess because of that. And that's kind of my first reaction. I do think that it's good to practice with only one serve. I think that young players, and even if you're just someone who wants to work on certain things, I think it's healthy sometimes to play a practice set with only one serve. From Same Old, have the courts become faster from last season? I haven't heard anything about that. From Sean, my boy Sean Dorcelis, thoughts on Big Foe to Lulu? I don't think they have the sizing right yet, but I think Leylah Fernandez's kits are usually awesome. So I have high hopes. I think that Foe is going to get a lot of good kits and look great. But when I first saw him, I felt like stuff wasn't fitting right here at this Aussie. From Fabulous Fabio, great username. What do you think about Alcaraz's new serve technique? Any impact on this season? As I said, I like it. From Thomas, is Maddie Keys firing on all cylinders? Is she top 2 of our best American chances? So basically, does she have the best chance to win the Australian Open after Coco? Do I want to do Pegula dirty like that? Yeah, I think I do. Yeah. I mean, Keys loves playing in Australia historically. I think she's got a couple of semifinals at the Australian Open. And she's in this honeymoon phase with her equipment. Like, I don't know how much she's talked about it publicly, but I've actually heard a lot about it. She switched from the Blade to the E-Zone, the Yonex E-Zone, so Wilson to Yonex. And she feels like she can't miss. Normally, the equipment thing, like that fades, that goes away. Normally, a player doesn't just turn their career around or become some kind of different player because they changed rackets. In fact, I can think of almost zero examples of that happening. But right now, in Maddie's head, I believe, that is what's happened. And the head is powerful. So don't discount the head. That means something. From Chloe with the Flow. For those of us who haven't had the chance to watch Fonseca yet, could you please? Could you please what? That's the problem with Instagram, is there's a pretty strict word limit. So I'm not sure what the question is here. From the player Avi Bear. Samrej playing amazing in sets 2 and 3, or is Medvedev done and there's no hope? So the Medvedev match yesterday was really weird, because I have some mixed feelings about it. On one hand, Medvedev did what I've been wanting to see out of Medvedev for the last 2 years. The serve was really dominant in this match. In the first 2 sets, he averaged over 125 first serve. I don't remember the last time I've seen him do that. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, holy moly, is it happening? Is Medvedev's serve back? Because at this point, I hadn't really had a lot of hope for that, to be honest. His serve speeds did go down as the match progressed, which was interesting to see. But his ace count ended up at, I think, 22 aces. I can't remember the last time Medvedev's done that. I think it's been a long, long time. And yeah, I mean, that's a high number, even in a 5-set match. So that was good. At the same time, you look at the result as a whole, and it's not a stock-up situation. In the second set, excuse me, you tried a deep return position, a close return position, and he quickly grew frustrated with it. He had trouble making returns in play. He kind of lost his focus and his composure there, started giving the classic thumbs up to his box. And Samrej has firepower. Like, he hits big and he drops shots and he comes forward. He comes at you. And Medvedev was just very non-impactful. Like, it was the worst version at times of Medvedev, of just like, man, you're not doing anything with the ball. You're not being disruptive. In set 3, after Medvedev was done, like, basically being pissed off at his coaches for telling him to stand in on return, he moved back, and Samrej, it almost seemed like every third service point, it was +1 drop shot. And when it wasn't +1 drop shot, it was +1 approach. And then sometimes in some big spots, it was serve and volley. So Samrej just kind of played the Medvedev offense against the deep return position beautifully. And then he broke down physically. And the 4th set and the 5th set wasn't competitive. You also had Daniil's tantrum. He broke a camera, so we have more camera violence from Medvedev after the incident a few years back where he kicked the camera in Cincinnati. This time he took out his rage on the net cam, which he should get a hefty fine for. Hefty. He did get a racket abuse warning. And I know people are like, he should be defaulted. I don't know, what's the rule you put in there? You can't destroy equipment. And I agree, it's kind of a pathetic look to take, that's expensive equipment. And I do feel like it should be treated better, honestly. It's not the end of the world. Like, there is a lot of money flying around here. Nobody's about to go broke. But smash a racket on the court, not the camera. You know, it's pretty immature. No doubt about it. Yeah, so lots to unpack with the Medvedev thing. Aaron says, I miss Rafa. Me too. Andrew Curry, where does Novak stand as the favorite to win the Australian Open? Probably fourth. And you know, in my predictions, I have him being upset against Tomas Machac, who's playing Opelka right now, by the way, which I'm going to turn on as soon as I'm done recording. So hopefully that doesn't age horrendously. But with that being said, like, understanding the potential for Novak, if he's firing, if he is essentially playing to the potential of what he's capable of, you know, and factoring all that in, I think he's still one of the title contenders. He's one of the 4 title contenders, right? Well, 4 main title contenders. VCU Ball asks, have you seen Serena's documentary? I thought it was done very well. Haven't seen that yet. Have not watched that yet. Why did Fonseca win? Made a video about that. From Lucas, what did you make of Kyrgios' statements, and what's your predicted year-end rank for Fonseca? Year-end rank for Fonseca, right now, I'll say 20 in the world. Permission to change it, but right now I'll say 20 in the world. Kyrgios' comments, he said that realistically, this is probably his last time playing singles at the Australian Open. So we're already talking retirement. I have probably more to say about Kyrgios than I'm going to right now. First off, it's tough. Like, I don't know if he's so disappointed. It's a little bit strange, right? Because he just had an abdominal strain. And if you just had an abdominal strain, it's like, all right, man, like, you'll be fine. Like, you'll heal up. You're still young. Like, why aren't you going to turn up at the Australian Open next year? Because you had an abdominal strain this year? Is the wrist not good still? If the wrist isn't good, then maybe that would change his thinking. But it's a little bit confusing in that respect. However, if Nick Kyrgios has a broken body, if his body is broken, despite the fact that he ain't that old, it would not be shocking, because he spent the vast majority of his career treating his body like garbage. Plus, he hasn't always been able to motivate himself throughout his career. In fact, I would say for most of his career, he has had an inability to put the hard work in and motivate himself. And in 2022, that changed. And apparently he worked very, very, very hard just to get to this point where he's playing on the court, where he's recovered from the wrist surgery. Apparently that's been very, very tough rehab. But then it kind of goes back to my confusion. If you did all that, then what for, right? Just to play 3 more tournaments and retire? A little bit odd to me. Some things don't add up there. But maybe his body is just done because he didn't take care of it. He put himself through the rigors of the tour without taking care of his body. So no surprise if he doesn't have the longevity at that point. Let's see. From I Am Ruth, how to make a living doing tennis stuff, be it YouTube, analytics, reporting, etc. Does it pay enough? YouTube alone, this podcast alone, I don't really make enough money to live off of it alone. I have some supplemental income from commentary, and those things combined is kind of what I'm able to make work. But content alone, not quite. Maybe if I was really, really frugal with my lifestyle. From Colina, Novak's fired up mentality but in my opinion, loss of focus. Wild misses on the forehand. I would focus more on the former, that he looked fired up against Basavareddy. I just thought he played that match with a lot of energy and a lot of passion. That's the main thing you want to see if you're a Novak fan. From Brown, how will sliding on hard court change the WTA? More and more players are starting to slide. Yeah, I mean, if you can hit bigger balls out of the corners on a more regular basis and recover faster, it's always an advantage. So that's a good trend to see on the WTA Tour. Will Fonseca's 2025 be like Alcaraz's 2021? Can he win a title this year? Yeah, I expect that. I expect Fonseca's season to be similar to Alcaraz's 2021. Let's see. Can you please explain, this one's from Ryan, can you please explain empty seats at some of these matches? Why wasn't Osaka Garcia packed? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you that last year, apparently the Australian Open had kind of an overcrowding issue. So I don't know if they've scaled back on the ticket sales. Probably not. Most events don't do that. But yeah, I'm not sure. From Phil, how do you feel watching Murray in Djokovic's box? I find it both unsettling and exciting. Unsettling, like just strange? Yeah, it's definitely strange. It's definitely exciting. I found it interesting that Novak was surprised about how vocal or involved that Andy was. It doesn't surprise me, but I would say if you're not Andy Murray, you're probably going to spend more time. Like if Novak hired, let's say a well-established coach, but one that wasn't Andy Murray, right? Usually with the coach and a player, there's a period of time where there's much more listening by the coach. Ask questions, listen. You're not talking that much. You're not shoving your input in. You are trying to get a feel for how a player is to be coached because every player is different. And for Andy to just be like, yeah, I'm going to skip that part. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to coach. It doesn't surprise me that Murray, with his stature and his level of authority, is going to just jump right into things. From Sebastian, do you think there will be another big change in rackets like in the 2000s? Great question. I wonder what some of our... I'd like to pass that question on to some people who are more in the racket world than I am. I mean, I know that recently rackets have become more dampened, easier on the arm, and a little bit lighter in weight so that guys can swing a little faster. What are some other recent racket trends? Maybe a little more, I don't know. Yeah, maybe more headlight as a whole recently. I feel like all of these changes are kind of complementing the modern baseliners game, but also acknowledging that with a full bed of poly strings, recreational players like need some help for their arms usually. And I think you have a lot of the pros using older models with less dampening technology, which is kind of an interesting trend. They like that more raw feel. But I'm not really sure if there's going to be another big innovation. Should there be a limit? This is another similar question from Atish. Should there be a limit on racket technology as defending in tennis becomes close to impossible? I don't agree with the statement. I think there's still plenty of defense in the game. I think Sinner, I know he hits the ball really, really hard, but don't let it fool you. He's defending a lot, and a lot of the advantages he's building in this match, I mean, against Jari, he won that whole match defending, right? Scrambling, making extra balls, extending points into errors. So I still think defense is a big part of the game. But I do think, like, if you have a guy like Petri Perikar starting to dominate the sport, alternate universe, I do think the powers that be would meddle with the technology a little bit. It might be a challenge that GMP faces in the future. Okay. One more from Instagram, and then we can move on. It's from Sean. Hi, Gil. Thoughts on the live Wii animation broadcasts the AO are using on YouTube? Yeah, like, pretty cool. Very, very, the most accessible way that Australian Open live tennis can be distributed is via these Wii animations. And it creates for maybe some good virality. Obviously, in an ideal world, everybody has access to watching these matches, but a couple things. One, you may have fans who get exposed to that who wouldn't be exposed to the real tennis because it's so accessible in the world of YouTube and its powerful algorithm. And again, I think it's a win-win. The Australian Open, they can't broadcast these matches out to everybody, like the real matches, without them being animated, because they sell exclusive rights to the media partners, and that is literally the business. That's how they make money, by selling those exclusive rights. But apparently they still own the exclusive rights, or they still have the ability to broadcast the matches live if it is all animated. So I think it's really cool. Okay, let us now go to X. From John, can Medvedev surpass last year's time on court and route to the final? Honestly, he's on pace to do it somehow. It's a funny one. Double fault. With Felix finding great form again, is he now a favorite over Paul and Ruud to make the quarterfinal in his section? He's always had the physical tools, and so far in 2025, his mentals seem locked in. Maybe he's finding his top 10 form again. Felix looks great in every area other than his backhand, which looks just as vulnerable as it's always looked. So my thoughts watching him throughout Adelaide was, okay, first of all, just the movement around the court, it looks 2021-like. Felix seems athletic again, like he can cover the court well. First serve, forehand, all operating at a very high level. But if you can find the backhand, it is bad. It is. I've been saying this recently just to kind of hammer the point home. I think sometimes Felix just gets a pass because he's got a two-hander, but it is every bit as bad as like Berrettini's backhand and Felix's Tsitsipas's backhand. In some ways, I'd rather Tsitsipas's backhand. Not on a fast surface, maybe, but I don't know. Trust me, like, if you kind of hone in on the Felix backhand, it's not performing. Is he the favorite over Paul and Ruud? Tough to say, right? That's an interesting little section. I'll say right after I filmed my predictions video, I watched Tommy play Felix, and I was like, yikes. And maybe it was because Paul had the pressure of trying to make the top 10, and he just played really, really tight. If he won that match, he would have made the top 10. Yeah, he hasn't looked good, right? 7-5 in the fifth against O'Connell. It's a great job fighting through in the end, but not another kind of non-convincing performance from Tommy Paul. And Casper went 5 with Jaume Munar. Munar's been playing well. I suspected that might be somewhat of a tough match, but it's about to get way tougher for Ruud, not easier. Who am I picking there now? That's the question, right? You want me to make a pick there. Let me go, should I go Mensik? Out of left field? No, I actually think Paul, based on his draw, I think he's going to make the quarters still. I'm going to stick with my original pick, even though he hasn't looked great. Do you think Basavareddy can become the Djokovic of the Sinner Alcaraz era? Slow your roll. Slow your roll. That said, stylistically and technique-wise, I tweeted this out. Nishesh Basavareddy does the best Novak Djokovic impersonation I have ever seen. It is unbelievable how Djokovician Basavareddy can be. And I was really pleasantly surprised by his quickness and speed around the court. He needs to get heavier. He needs to improve his endurance. But he's such a rock-solid player. The return and the backhand are his best assets, but I also don't think there's a weakness. I think he is incredibly complete. Really, really great tennis from Basavareddy against Novak. From Jake, do you think Alex Michelsen doesn't get enough praise/hype for what he's done in his career so far? Only 20, he's made 3 ATP finals, and he's top 40. And with the trajectory he's going at, he'll probably be a seed at the US Open, in my opinion. Hell yeah, he's underhyped. Hell yeah. That said, he's underhyped for a reason. He's underhyped because his game is really hard to understand. And I think I have a quote. Let me pull up my Michelsen notes. Here's a quote from Brad Stein, Tommy Paul's coach. Quote, he's impressively unimpressive. You have to have a pretty deep understanding of tennis to see what he's doing out there. And I fully agree with that. The serve, although he's tall, it's not like he's going to serve you off the court necessarily. The forehand, not going to blow you off the court. The backhand, let's take the backhand, and then I'm going to move on. The backhand is stellar, but it's not stellar in the same way, I don't know, Sinner, Zverev, Fonseca, like they might hit, even Alcaraz, they might hit big booming backhands where you go, oh my God, he uncorked the ball. Michelsen's backhand is great because of how often and easily he's able to change direction on it, how consistent it is, and where on the court he puts the ball. Like the length that he's able to achieve on his backhand consistently. And it's flat through the court. So even Michelsen's best damn shot takes a level of aficionadoism in order to appreciate. And that's why Michelsen doesn't get enough praise and hype. From John, who are you more optimistic about, Tien or Basavareddy? Basavareddy. I'm just a fan of his overall technical package a little bit more. I like his serve better. I like his backhand better. And I see long-term Basavareddy having less limitations than Tien. From Valdez, Carlos is given flack for not playing well in Australian Open. He has only played once since becoming Grand Slam Carlos in 2024 and lost to Zverev in the quarters. Remember, he lost it. Who's giving? I'm just going to stop it right there. I don't think anybody's giving flack for Carlos not playing well at the Australian Open. From Joao, did Fonseca, this isn't Joao F asking this question. This is Joao Double G asking this question. Gabriel Gelly. Did Fonseca have the greatest slam main draw debut of all time? Possibly. My thinking, like just off the top of my head, yeah, I can't think of anything equal of that. Let's go to Hash. Huge fan of the pod and all your content. Thank you. Where do you think Prime Osaka would fit in today's landscape? She was the best hardcourt player in the world at her peak, in my opinion, but a bit weaker on the natural surfaces. Would she, in her prime, contend for slams now? And could she even today? Prime Osaka. Yeah, I think what was kind of missing last year was the mental side. She was incredibly unclutched. She would get nervous in pressure situations constantly. She didn't really have the same kind of killer instinct or a competitive drive that she had in her prime. Even though a lot of the talent stuff was still very evident in terms of the ball striking off of both wings and the serve, I think Osaka would have a place in today's game. I don't think the game has moved on so quickly that Osaka in her peak would not be able to contend for slams against the likes of Sabalenka and Swiatek. What was up with Brooksby's and Triple Z's serves? They look like they changed. Brooksby's in particular looks like the abbreviated serve they teach kids, and it's worse than ever. He always had that serve. Triple Z changed it, and so did Arnaldi. It's really interesting to see. Zhang and Arnaldi both have very, very abbreviated serve preparation now. Like, yeah, it's strange. I don't think it looks particularly good in either case. From Gus, this is a good one. Do you agree with Tsitsipas that he's a better player than he used to be? Here's what he said, quote, I would actually say that I'm a better player now than I was back then. So even though I'm losing now and I'm not at my best, I feel like I'm much better as a player than back then, where I felt like my shots were just not as heavy in terms of topspin. I was playing much more flat and much more through the court. I feel like such a thing now wouldn't work as effectively as it did back then. My brain is kind of twisted in knots reading this. He's basically saying, I'm a better player now than I was then because I hit with more topspin now. Which is, I mean, I just can't believe that that is how he's thinking about things. And also, people looked at the data on Twitter, and his topspin rates, at least on the backhand, have stayed basically the same from throughout his entire career, which is a lot of topspin. He's always played with a lot of topspin on the backhand. So he's a better player now because he hits heavier, but he feels like if he hit flatter, it wouldn't work well now. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a cope, mostly. So I think he makes an interesting point, okay? He makes an interesting point about how stagnation can appear as if you are regressing, right? So the game does evolve. Players are pushing the envelope. I do believe the game is getting faster and players are serving bigger. He actually did allude to that in this very press conference. I think that's true. Michelsen was averaging like 115 on his first serve, so it wasn't huge. But in general, I think that's true. And that does hurt Tsitsipas, so that part makes sense. Philosophically, it's a very interesting point that he makes. But then once you grind into the details, like him saying, well, I'm better now because I hit with more topspin. It's like, what? How does 1 + 1 = 2 there? Because he's saying I hit a heavier ball now, but then he also said in the same press conference that his shots didn't have enough on it in this match. And he's very obsessed. He seems very insecure with how big his shots are right now. And he feels like they're not big enough. And that's been kind of a common theme. He said that about his backhand recently, publicly. He was like, yeah, I couldn't get anything on my backhand. It's like, I think that I still feel like there's a lot of thoughts in his head and somebody needs to come in and bring some clarity. And yes, I am hinting at a very strong-willed, authoritative coach. That's what he needs, in my opinion. From String Theory, is Giovanni Pecci Pericard's backhand too big of a weakness? He runs around at Tsitsipas style so often, and he won't be able to beat top-ranked players until he feels more confident on that wing. Not necessarily. There are a lot of different ways he can hide it. First of all, if he continues to improve as a net rusher, I think that is, one way to hide it is if he finds himself up at net often. But if he can keep dialing in the reliability of his aggressive forehand, along with the size of the serve that he has, he doesn't need his backhand to be great. What also gives me a lot of hope for Pecci Pericard is his slice is there. I don't know if it's great or if it's elite, but his slice is there. And at some point in his career, he might want to think about slicing more often than he does right now, because it might be a better play for him for a multitude of reasons. It's something that he needs to experiment. How often should he drive? How often should he slice? I also like that he can play his aggressive style off of his one-handed backhand. Yes, it's a loose cannon. It's probably one of the least consistent backhands in the world, but at least he can take big cuts and big risks off of it, and that's how he needs to play. From Max, I know he wasn't 100%, but what are your main takeaways about Kyrgios from his match versus Fearnley? Just that his body couldn't support what he was trying to do out there. That's all. Was Sinner's serve failing him in the first round, or am I wrong? Yeah, it was out of rhythm. Had a rough percentage day. Nothing to worry about, though. Sinner did allude to tweaking the motion slightly, but to my eyes, whatever he changed is a very, very small detail, because I don't even really see it. From Drew, what are the 3 areas of Petchy Perricard's game that he needs to improve most? Volleys, attacking forehand reliability, and aggressive returning. All right, now we move on to the YouTube community tab. Go about what? How much more time will I go? Maybe about 15 more minutes. From VHO, might be a basic question. Is Australian Open court speed faster, same, or slower than last year? Also, please, it would be great if you can explain why and how court speeds change from one year to another. So the simple answer to your question, and I've already said I am not aware of the court speed being different this year. I haven't heard anything, but it might just be that I haven't heard. The reason why it can change sometimes year to year is because they do resurface these courts every single year. So you are getting a new surface every year. And with that, you can get some variability. I know that most tournaments all tournaments will tell the manufacturer what they want in terms of a CPI reading. So I know the US Open asks the manufacturer for a medium fast, which means they have determined what CPI, which is court pace index, which is a measurement of court speed, what CPI they want in the medium fast range. They tell the manufacturer fall within that range. They build one court, they test out that one court, figure out if it's satisfactory, and then after they build that one court, if it's good, then they say, okay, good, build that court 25 different times all around the grounds. So that's how it works. From Augusto, maybe. Is it? Yeah. Hey, Gil, I'm Brazilian and have been following you for over a year. Obrigado. The man of the moment is Fonseca for obvious reasons. There's a lot of precaution with this man's future here, but it is almost consensus that he's got the potential to win a slam and to be on top of the game. However, he'll have to face in the majority of his career Sinner and Alcaraz in their primes. Do you think he can already win big titles in 2025 and 26 like Alcaraz in the beginning of his career, or do you think he will take a bit longer? Like Sinner developed his variation and his endurance. Fonseca is a rare South American since he's not too emotional with bad moments, has really aggressive play style, and his game translates across all 3 surfaces. Thank you. Well, you asked me a really good question here. Will Fonseca's trajectory follow the path of more of an Alcaraz, or will it follow the path of more of a Sinner? That's a good question. I would have probably told you Sinner, because Fonseca just reminds me more of Sinner, where you don't have an athlete like immediately with Alcaraz, at least right away, start of 2022 at the very least. You knew that Alcaraz was the most explosive athlete on the tour. and he was the best mover, and he was going to have endurance for days. Fonseca, he's not quite there physically, so he's kind of in the Sinner realm where Jannik had to get stronger physically a little bit later on. I would say Fonseca is more like that. And that said, the serve ahead of where Sinner's serve was, and I'd say overall the completeness of his game is ahead of where Sinner's was. Well, might be somewhere in the middle, but at this point in time, with a tiny, tiny sample size, it's actually looking a little bit more like the Alcaraz trajectory, given what we've seen from him in the last 2 months. From Fishy, this comment had 13 likes. Why can't Hubert beat Grigor? In all their encounters, Grigor's 6-0 head-to-head lead has been determined by really fine margins in really tight matches. Hubie doesn't necessarily seem to lack the weapons to beat Grigor like he might lack against Djokovic, but he always falls flat at the finishing line. Why does this always happen? Is it physical or mental? It's physically painful whenever I see Grigor and Hubie's draw as a Hurkacz fan. I think it has become mental. It almost always does at a certain point here. Let me just pull up the head-to-head so I can remind myself of some of these matches. One thing I always think about with Grigor is backhand slice. So he is one of the most frequent slicers of the backhand on tour. I think it's a great play against Hubert because Hubie's backhand is so flat that he doesn't like to hit it from low contact points. And in order for him to get the ball, to lift up on the ball, get it over the height of the net and down before the baseline, he has to take a ton of speed off the ball in order to accomplish that. So when Dimitrov hits the slice backhand cross court in a Hurkacz's backhand, Hubie basically needs to massage his backhand. And when he massages the backhand, it gives Dimitrov extra time to either rip his next backhand down the line, open court, or even better if you're Dimitrov, run around, find a big aggressive forehand. So one of the first things to look at for a flat backhand like Hurkacz's, which is really as flat as there is on tour, and a slice backhand, if it's righty on righty, like Dimitrov has, is that particular issue. I also think that, look, you see tight margins, and you're right. I'm looking at a lot of three setters. I'm looking at a lot of tie breaks. The last three setter was at Roland Garros, so that's a straight setter. First of all, that's just two guys who hold much more than they break. They're high hold rate guys, low break rate guys. So you're going to see those tight margins. But I do think Hurkacz can struggle against elite serve plus ones because the scrambling ability, and while he is a very capable defender, a very willing defender, sometimes he just finds himself behind the 8 ball and he doesn't really have the speed to withstand the really elite serve plus ones. That's why he struggles to break serve. I guess that's my best answer, but I also think it has become mental. From Tafori Music, hey Gil, do you think playing an ultra-aggressive style of tennis is the best for longevity and saving your knees? Should more rec players focus on biting down on the mouth guard and swinging for the fences? I mean, this is a really interesting question. I think the answer is no. I think there are better ways to preserve the body than to get recklessly aggressive in your matches. If you're trying to save your body as a casual recreational player, I mean, one of those things is like do activation before you play, ice after you play, take rest days if you need to take rest days. And to me, that's more rewarding. Like just doing those things that, and maybe perhaps like get in the gym and do some of the exercises that are going to strengthen the muscles around your knees. Now, I do feel a little bit hypocritical because I'm not the best about these things and I can have some knee issues from time to time. In general, knock on wood, I've been pretty healthy recently, but I can have these issues and I'm not always so good about these things. And it's hard when you're a regular person, not a pro player, to dedicate yourselves to these things. But it's really the better way to go. Take care of your body if you're trying to take care of your body, rather than go for the big forehand down the line when the right shot is to play high cross court into a big target. That's kind of my 2 cents on that. From Simple Spaces, why didn't Federer's graceful technique trickle down to younger generations? Nobody has even come close to looking as smooth and effortless. Instead, players look more explosive. I've even seen Federer hit a two-handed backhand, and it looks more graceful than most players. Do the lighter rackets nowadays require more explosive action? No, I don't think so. Honestly, if you're asking me who looks the most Federer-like on tour, I got to go to the women's side. Muchova. Especially her forehand. And some of the footwork when she moves inside the court to hit approach shots. Yeah, Muchova. But what can I say? Like, Federer was not normal. The guy was one of a kind. And that's okay. And not particularly surprising, in my opinion. All right, last one from Matthew here. Hey, Gil, have we crossed the threshold where Nick Kyrgios is now objectively bad for the game of tennis? I understand him wanting a clean sport. I agree with him on that principle, but he has this arrogance regarding these delicate doping situations, which I think has only served to amplify the tennis conspiracy theorists instead of working to get more clarity and fairness for all involved. What are your thoughts? Thanks. I'm in 2 schools of thought here. On one hand, I hesitate to claim or imply that Kyrgios' social media accounts have enough power to be bad for the sport of tennis. It's all noise. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. And frankly, it's just giving him too much importance. That said, his skepticism when it comes to all this doping stuff has definitely fueled and empowered a lot of people to sort of throw up their arms. And I don't know, it's given fuel to an anti-Sinner, anti-Swiatek fire. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, you can have like this, look, you can have skepticism, you can resent the system, and I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to say that everything is perfect and there's nothing that anybody can question and all that stuff. I'm not saying that. But it is clear and obvious that Nick Kyrgios has not been dealing in facts and has not been able to explain his viewpoint in a way that progresses the conversation or provides any clarity or interesting discourse about anti-doping in tennis. It seems as if Nick Kyrgios has 2 beliefs. From what I can discern from his social media accounts, he has 2 beliefs. The first belief is that Jannik Sinner and Iga Swiatek attempted to cheat, that they are dopers. I have not heard the argument based on the facts presented. He has not explained why he doesn't believe. What part of the story do you not buy? And why is it that the evidence that was presented is insufficient to you, Nick? Right? That'd be my first question. The second thing is that he has claimed, or he has shared the belief that if you fail a doping test, it should be an automatic ban. There should be no discussion of faults, levels of fault or negligence based on various circumstances, that is a black and white situation. Okay. First of all, I believe there are probably people out there who can make an intelligent argument that that's how it should work. Not a lot of people, but probably some people who, like, if given the prompt and maybe they truly believe it, could actually make an argument that at least deals in reality. Haven't gotten that from Nick. My question to Nick would be, do you believe in tainted supplements? Or do you think they're just a matter of fiction, that they're not a real thing. So it's inconceivable that a player might fail a drug test due to something they took after reading the ingredients, seeing nothing banned on the ingredients list, and then failing a drug test as a result of taking whatever supplement or medication they may have taken. Does Nick think that that's just not a possibility? I don't know, because he hasn't explained himself. You asked me if Nick Kyrgios is bad for tennis. Here's what's bad for tennis. What's bad for tennis is the 2022 Nick Kyrgios that was not only a captivating player to watch play on the court, but also a player who could contend for big titles and make the sport more interesting with his racket. That guy has been MIA, non-existent for the last 2 years, and it looks like he might never be back. And by the way, for the many, many years prior to 2022, that guy wasn't there. Even though the ability and the talent was inside of him, that guy didn't have the dedication or the drive or the mental health or the will to put in the hard work, whatever, to fulfill his capabilities. That's what's been bad for tennis. Now, net, he certainly brings attention. He certainly gets big ratings. And I'm not one of those fools who tries to deny the reality around how many eyeballs Nick Kyrgios brings to tennis. But let's not get it twisted. It could be and should be way, way more. That's what's sad and bad for tennis. All right, that'll do it for this mailbag. I will be back with another show wrapping up the second round of the Australian Open. We'll cover some matches. We'll cover some storylines. I'll talk to you then. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.